The woman's frozen body lay curled in a cave, clutching a deer-tooth pendant that had been carved with impossible precision. 20,000 years after her death, scientists would extract her DNA from that pendant and discover something that changed everything we thought we knew about the Ice Age. Because this woman wasn't some primitive cave dweller barely scraping by. She was part of the most sophisticated survival network the world had ever seen. 26,000 years ago, Earth tried to kill every human alive. The planet became a frozen wasteland where temperatures dropped 15 degrees colder than today's worst winters. Ice sheets buried entire continents. The air itself turned toxic with 25 times more dust than we breathe now. Most animals went extinct. But humans? Humans looked at the apocalypse and said, "Hold my bone needle." You see, when archaeologists started digging into Ice Age sites, they expected to find the usual story. Desperate people huddling around fires, gnawing on scraps, barely surviving day to day. Instead, they found evidence of the most incredible technological revolution in human history. These people weren't just surviving the Ice Age, they were engineering their way through it. At a site called Yana River in northern Siberia, researchers uncovered something that broke their understanding of prehistoric life. Hidden in permafrost were needle cases, not just one or two crude tools, but organized storage systems containing 192 perfectly crafted-eyed needles. Each needle was precision drilled from carefully selected animal bones. Fox bones for flexibility, lynx bones for strength, hare bones for fine detail work. This wasn't primitive craftsmanship. When scientists examined these needles under electron microscopes, they found manufacturing techniques that wouldn't look out of place in a modern factory. The eye holes were perfectly circular, drilled with tools that left microscopic spiral patterns. The points were shaped and polished to surgical sharpness. These people had invented industrial-scale clothing production 30,000 years before anyone thought to plant a seed. But here's where it gets crazy. They weren't just making clothes. They were making layered clothing systems. Fitted undergarments beneath outer garments. They invented underwear. In the Ice Age, when most of Europe was buried under glaciers, these humans were walking around in custom-tailored survival suits that would make modern Arctic gear look primitive. The needles tell only part of the story. At Dolní Věstonice in what's now the Czech Republic, people were firing the world's first ceramics while woolly mammoths still roamed outside their doors. They were creating Venus figurines with artistic detail that rivals anything from the Renaissance, but the most shocking discovery was their architecture. 15,000 years ago, at a place called Mazurik in Ukraine, humans built something that defied every assumption about Stone Age capabilities. Using the bones of 149 mammoths, they constructed elaborate dwellings with fitted ivory joints, suspended floors for air circulation, and strategic heating systems. This wasn't a shelter, this was engineering. The structure at Mazurik spans 40 feet in diameter. The walls rise 12 feet high, built with interlocking mammoth skulls and leg bones arranged in precise geometric patterns. Massive mammoth tusks serve as structural supports, joined together with carved ivory sleeves that fit so perfectly you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. Inside, they created separate rooms with different functions. Storage areas, workshop spaces, even what appears to be a nursery. Think about what this means. To build this structure, they needed to hunt and process at least 95 different mammoths. They needed to transport bones weighing hundreds of pounds across miles of frozen terrain. They needed to understand load-bearing calculations, thermal dynamics, and architectural engineering. This required teams of workers, coordinated planning, and months of construction time. But the most mind-blowing part? This wasn't an emergency shelter thrown together during a desperate winter. Evidence shows these mammoth bone houses were permanent settlements occupied for decades. Multiple generations lived in these structures, making repairs and improvements over time. While most of the world was frozen solid, these people were building cities. How did they organize projects this massive? The answer came from an unexpected source. When scientists started mapping where Ice Age tools and materials came from, they discovered something incredible. Raw materials were traveling hundreds of miles. Obsidian from volcanic regions showed up in settlements 300 miles away. Seashells from Mediterranean beaches made it to caves in Central Europe. Amber from the Baltic Sea reached settlements near the Black Sea. This wasn't random wandering. This was trade. Organized, systematic, long-distance trade networks that spanned entire continents. During the worst climate crisis in human history, people were maintaining economic relationships across distances that would challenge modern logistics. The scale of these networks is staggering. Archaeologists found spondylus shells from the Aegean Sea in settlements near the English Channel. That's a 3,000-mile journey requiring coordination between dozens of different groups. Someone had to harvest the shells. Someone had to transport them across mountain ranges and river systems. Someone had to negotiate passage through territories controlled by other tribes. And someone had to find communities willing to trade valuable resources for decorative shells. But the real breakthrough in understanding Ice Age society came in 2023, when scientists achieved something that sounds like science fiction. They extracted human DNA from a 20,000-year-old deer tooth pendant found in Denisova Cave. For the first time in history, they could connect a specific prehistoric tool to the actual person who owned it. The pendant belonged to a woman. The DNA analysis revealed she had strong genetic ties to ancient North Eurasian populations, showing that even 20,000 years ago, people were maintaining genetic connections across vast distances. But here's what shocked the researchers. The pendant showed evidence of being worn regularly, suggesting it wasn't just decoration, it was identification. A way to show which network you belonged to when you encountered strangers hundreds of miles from home. This changes everything about how we picture Ice Age life. These weren't isolated tribes barely scraping by. They were members of continental social networks with their own identification systems, trade protocols, and cooperative agreements. When someone needed obsidian for tools or shells for ceremony, they knew exactly who to contact and how to reach them. The cooperation went deeper than trade. At sites across Europe and Asia, archaeologists found evidence of coordinated hunting expeditions between different groups. Mammoth kill sites show butchering patterns from multiple cultural traditions working side by side. Cave art projects that required years to complete show artistic styles from different regions combined in single locations. Even the most isolated settlements contain materials and techniques that could only have come from active information exchange with distant communities. But how did they coordinate all this activity? The answer lies in something even more remarkable than their technology or their trade networks. These people had fundamentally rewired their own biology. Recent genetic analysis revealed that Ice Age populations developed specific physiological adaptations for extreme cold survival, enhanced lung capacity for processing thin, frigid air, cardiovascular changes that improved circulation to extremities, mitochondrial adaptations that let their cells extract more energy from limited food supplies. Here's the incredible part. These weren't random evolutionary changes that took thousands of generations. These were targeted adaptations that appeared within centuries of the Ice Age beginning. Somehow, these populations were accelerating their own evolution in response to environmental pressure. The key was metabolic efficiency. While their Neanderthal cousins had robust, powerful builds that required 40% more calories to maintain, Ice Age humans evolved to do more with less. Smaller frames that needed less food, more efficient digestive systems that extracted maximum nutrition from available resources, brains that could solve complex problems while using minimal energy. This metabolic advantage became crucial when the Ice Age reached its peak 21,000 years ago. At that moment, Earth's temperature hit its absolute minimum. Ice core data shows temperatures 15 degrees colder than today's Arctic. Sea levels dropped 400 feet. Atmospheric dust levels soared so high that sunlight barely penetrated to the surface. Most large animals went extinct. Even the mighty Neanderthals, who had survived hundreds of thousands of years of climate changes, finally succumbed to conditions too extreme for their high metabolism lifestyle. But humans looked at the apocalypse and innovated their way through it. At Caveman Cave in Israel, they had already developed controlled fire technology that reached temperatures of 500 degrees. They weren't just keeping warm, they were running sophisticated chemical processes, heating birch bark to create waterproof adhesives, processing plant materials to extract fibers for rope and clothing, creating the world's first preserved foods by storing deer bone marrow in skin containers for up to 9 weeks. Think about that for a moment. While most of the world was frozen solid, these people were running what amounts to ancient laboratories. They understood that autumn-stored marrow lasted 9 weeks while spring-stored marrow spoiled after 3 weeks. They knew which hardwoods burned hottest and which softwoods created the least smoke. They could predict seasonal weather patterns months in advance and plan their resource management accordingly. The sophistication of their food preservation technology rivals anything achieved before the modern era. They discovered that keeping deer leg bones intact with skin-preserved marrow longer than any other storage method. They learned to time their hunting to maximize preservation periods. They developed rotation systems that ensured fresh nutrition throughout the winter months. But perhaps the most incredible aspect of Ice Age survival was what happened when multiple human species competed for the same resources. Archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans all occupied overlapping territories during the Ice Age peak. All 3 species had sophisticated tool technologies. All 3 had mastered fire. All 3 lived in organized social groups. Yet only modern humans survived. Why? The answer isn't what you'd expect. Neanderthals were stronger, more cold-adapted, and had larger brains. Denisovans were equally intelligent and had genetic adaptations for high-altitude survival. But modern humans had something neither of their competitors possessed: the ability to cooperate with strangers. When resources became scarce during the Ice Age peak, Neanderthals and Denisovans competed primarily within their own family groups. Modern humans formed alliances between unrelated communities. When one group's hunting grounds froze over, they had backup options hundreds of miles away. When one community's tool-making materials ran out, they could trade with distant partners who had surplus supplies. This cooperative advantage compounded over time. Communities that shared information survived better than communities that hoarded secrets. Groups that welcomed refugees had larger populations and more genetic diversity. Networks that maintained trade relationships had access to resources that isolated groups could never obtain. By 20,000 years ago, modern humans had created something unprecedented in evolutionary history: a continent-spanning civilization that could survive conditions no individual community could endure alone. When local disasters struck one settlement, the network provided support. When new technologies emerged in one region, they spread rapidly to communities thousands of miles away. The woman with the deer tooth pendant was part of this network. Her DNA shows genetic connections to populations across northern Eurasia, proving that even in the depths of the Ice Age, people were maintaining contact across distances that would challenge modern transportation. Her pendant wasn't just jewelry, it was proof of membership in humanity's first global civilization. This is what allowed humans to survive the impossible. Not superior strength or bigger brains or better tools. Cooperation. The willingness to help strangers. The insight that everyone survives better when everyone survives together. When Earth's climate stabilized and the Ice Age ended, these cooperative networks became the foundation for everything that followed. Agriculture spread along the same trade routes that Ice Age hunters had used to exchange obsidian and shells. Cities arose at locations where Ice Age communities had gathered for seasonal cooperation. Written language developed to manage the same kind of long-distance relationships that Ice Age people had maintained through oral tradition and symbolic objects. The last glacial maximum didn't break humanity. It forged us into the species we are today. Those frozen nights 26,000 years ago, when our ancestors looked at an impossible situation and chose cooperation over competition, innovation over resignation, hope over despair, made us who we are. Every time modern humans face a crisis and choose to work together rather than fight each other, we're channeling the spirit of that woman with the deer tooth pendant. Every time we share knowledge instead of hoarding it, we're honoring the Ice Age innovators who created humanity's first global civilization. The coldest night in human history wasn't our darkest hour. It was the moment we learned that together, humans can survive anything,